My guest today on 12 Minutes With is Arsenio Dominguez. He is the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, which is the UN agency responsible for shipping safety and security. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd like to start, obviously, with the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. We've heard now from President Trump saying that the US has, according to him, effectively blockaded maritime access to Iranian ports. Tehran says this is a piracy. How would you describe it?
Right now, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz continues to be critical. In particular, highlight the 20,000 seafarers, innocent people that are still trapped in the Persian Gulf, around 2,000 vessels that are not able to transit the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, this also has an impact on the mental health, the fatigue, and the fact that they need supplies for them to be safely on board, from food, water, and the fuels for the ships. Now, when it comes to the blockade, there's no international law agreement that allows any country to actually prohibit the freedom of navigation on straits used for international navigation. So in this case, we here at IMO continues to uphold that principle and to call for de-escalations in order for the ships to resume operations through the Strait of Hormuz as we were used to before the conflict.
So you say that this is against international rules. The President Trump says, however, that this could help restore the flow of shipping. Can it do so, or is it simply worsening an already dire situation?
The reality is that from the moment that this conflict started, we saw that the 130 ships that normally would transit the Strait of Hormuz came down to zero or almost just a handful of them. And what happened afterwards was that the Islamic Republic of Iran introduced a different corridor to the one that has been in operations and adopted by IMO back in 1968, which of course is not recognized by this organization. And thus is the situation that we have right now, that because there's no confirmation that the corridor that was established by IMO is safe to transit right now, we also don't have any information on the safety and security of the other corridor that has been introduced by Iran. The reality is that what we need is for this to de-escalate and from all parties to respect the measures that have been adopted by IMO and the freedom of navigation.
But if both sides are flouting these rules, what can you do, or what can the international community do to get back to the pre-conflict status quo? What needs to happen now? Is there some kind of mechanism that could be put in place to restore the freedom of navigation in the Strait?
The first answer is simple, which is basically to de-escalate and to bring this conflict to an end. In parallel, in following the decision of the IMO Council a couple of weeks ago, we already have in place an evacuation framework that would allow us, as soon as it is free for the ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz, to reinitiate all these mechanisms, all this transit. We have since 1968 a traffic separation scheme that is coordinated between Oman and Iran, and this is established in accordance with international law. It's ready to resume operations. We are working with both countries, but we need security in the region for the ships, and in particularly the crew, not to be at risk when they resume operations.
You say you're working with both countries. Can I ask you what your contacts with both Washington and Tehran are like? Are you getting any sort of receptive or indications that they understand the gravity of the situation and are willing to de-escalate?
This is a dialogue. And of course, I keep all the conversations within the remit of IMO. I have shared with them all the plans that we have developed in an operational and technical manner for as soon as the conflict de-escalates, for us to start resuming the transit in accordance to the mechanisms adopted by IMO. The countries are party to the organization, and they know what the rules of the game are in accordance to our mechanisms. I also engage with all the countries in the region and countries beyond the region, because let's face it, it's not just one or two countries that are being affected by this conflict. It's every single country around the world that actually is feeling a negative impact.
And on that, there is a global coalition meeting tomorrow led by Paris and London. They seem to be saying that they're willing to sort of intervene to help on restoring the freedom of navigation after the conflict has ended. Do you welcome those efforts? What do you expect from this coalition?
Absolutely. This is multilateralism in the way that we need it. It's bringing countries together to, again, reiterate the principles of the freedom of navigation, that shipping should not be used as collateral in these geopolitical instances, and that we need to secure our seafarers in particular. I'm very grateful to the leadership of the countries of France and the United Kingdom, and I am engaging with them because we are providing the expertise from all the work that the organization has put in place. And of course, they will be able to provide that assistance to guarantee that the strait is safe for the ships to transit as soon as the conflict is over.
You say that shipping should not be used as collateral in geopolitical conflicts, but if I may, sir, it is at the moment. We're seeing Trump not only threatening freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran doing the same, but the US president has also made open threats on freedom of navigation through the Panama Canal, for example, and other critical waterways. How difficult is it for you as an organization to defend these rules in this context?
I work very closely with all the member states of IMO. And of course, here, the message for the organization would not change. We uphold the international rule of law, in particular, the freedom of navigation. Now, this is not the first time. Regrettably, in recent years, since the conflicts in the Black Sea and the Red Sea, now in the Strait of Hormuz, shipping continues to be used as leverage for this geopolitical conflict. But it is important for everyone in the planet to recognize that the moment that shipping gets affected, that's going to have a negative impact on everybody else, on the way that we live our daily lives. Because shipping, it is necessary for all of us to provide and distribute in large quantities the goods, the cargoes that are essential for our daily living.
Is there a risk also that in this war, we know that there's a fragile ceasefire in place right now, but is there a risk that it can now shift to more of an economic war of blockades that really plays out in the Strait and shift into more of a kind of economic maritime war? Is that something you fear?
What I look for is that in the rights forum, the root causes of this conflict can be addressed, and it's beyond IMO. From our part, we will continue to uphold all the principles in accordance with international law. But beyond that, to make sure that our technical rules and operational aspects of shipping continue to demonstrate that we can actually be as resilient as we've always been, continue to provide, adapt to this conflict, and that the more that we actually get engaged and drag into, the more that some communities, innocent communities, will be affected.
I want to ask you a little bit about the economic repercussions. You mentioned earlier that only a handful of vessels have been able to pass compared to the pre-conflict situation. Can you tell us a little bit about the scenario today, and also about how, if this persists, continues, what will be the repercussions on the economy?
We already see the increase in global prices, particularly when it comes to oil. Now, the longer that this continues, the more that we will feel the negative impacts in the global economy, because shipping is resilient and we can find different routes to operate and navigate. But what we will not be able to do is to provide the 20% of the fuel oil that emanates from this region, 19% of natural liquefied gas, 13% of fertilizers and chemicals required for agriculture, 9% of automobiles that also are actually coming from this part of the world. That is an impact that we will not be able to address, because you need shipping to actually carry those cargoes in bulk. And this is why the sooner that this conflict comes to an end, the quicker that step by step shipping will resume normal operations and the economy will start easing on all this negative pressure.
We also know, and to close, I want to ask you about how this has also resulted in a soaring freight rate, also soaring insurance premiums. Does this risk then having a knock-on effect that will also affect consumers in terms of pricing?
Definitely. The moment that you affect freight in the operations of ships, the moment that that becomes more expensive or is more restrictive because not all the goods can actually be provided, then it's a knock-on effect into the global economy. And that will be passed down to consumers.
And in terms then of the shipping companies, is this a golden opportunity for them? Will they end up profiting?
Not necessarily. And I don't think that it's appropriate to actually look at it in that perspective because this is not something that the shipping companies are calling for. They're also being affected because, of course, there is an increase on the operational cost of the ships. Fuel goes up, and that is the main cost of the operations of the ships. Immediately, everything else will go up.
How hopeful are you, to close, that we can go back to the pre-conflict status quo, as I mentioned earlier? Is that possible, or do you think that this conflict has already disrupted that status quo and that a return will not be possible?
I'm optimistic, of course, that we're actually going to resume and go back to the days where we were before the conflict. And I continue to call on the relevant parties to, of course, bring those dialogue that will address the root causes. The reason why I am optimistic is because we are all acknowledging and recognizing and living through the negative impacts from this conflict. And this is one of the key messages that we all need to work together to demonstrate that the moment that these kind of situations takes place, like shipping being used as collateral, we're all going to have the negative effects. So it is our voices that are also going to make us be positive and allow that these kind of situations don't repeat again.
Okay, Secretary General, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.